Hi, I'm GM Matthew Sadler.
And I'm WIM Natasha Regan. Today's game features some glorious engine chess, and by which I mean there's sacrifices galore, lots of interesting ideas, and plenty of moves that we just can't understand. But we'll be guided through by Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and me. The game is an Advanced Caro-Kann. Scorpio is white and Leela is black. And Leela decides to sacrifice a rook. Now, many of the lines you'll see following that involve 4 or 5 pawns, black pawns, pushing through the center, and crazy positions result. And the question really is when white should try and take back some of the material. Very exciting struggle emerges, which we'll see just now.
Okay, let's have a look at it. You've given it a big lead up. Let's see whether it lives up to it. Okay, let's have a look at this crazy game then. The opening book move started e4, c6, d4, d5, e5, which is the advanced variation of the Caro-Kann. And there's 2 possibilities here. There's c5, which is the Henkin-Arkle variation of the advance. Quite an unusual little idea, just wasting a tempo, but striking back immediately at the white centre. And bishop f5, which is the old main line and still probably the most popular move. So h4, a very popular move with white, especially recently. And now h6, which was the old-fashioned choice in actual fact. Black's often playing h5 to stop what actually happens in the game, which is g4, bishop d7, and h5. So it looks a little bit odd in a way that that white's only moving pawns in the opening. This concept was actually developed originally by Michal Tal for his return match against Botvinnik in 1961. And well, it turns out to be a very strong plan. The only problem is that Tal played it rather strangely. I mean, after c5, c3, knight c6 from Botvinnik, Tal tended to put his bishop on h3. He also did that in a subsequent game, and yeah, I'm just not really sure what that bishop on h3 is doing. Well, somehow, in these sort of quite closed strategical positions, putting your pieces on the wrong squares against Botvinnik, that's really not what's going to make you happy. And well, Botvinnik tended to do quite well from these positions. But how they do it nowadays is a bit more normal. Well, black plays e6 mostly, f4, c5, and then c3. And basically we've got an advanced French opening, that's what it looks like, but where white's played quite a few moves on the king side as well. And
white's moved only pawns so far.
Yeah, first 8 moves. Exactly.
This would be a bit like there's a player in England called Surtees who...
Mike Surtees, that's right.
Put his pieces out too early.
Yes, he's always moving his pawns, first of all. It's true. I'm sure he'd love this opening. You're absolutely right. It's I mean, it's actually very nice for white. All these pawns, they stop the black knight on g8 from getting any sort of outpost. f6, of course, but f5 as well. The knight comes e7 to f5, often in Frenches. And the pawn on h5 prevents black from striking back with h5 on the king's side. So, in general, I like white here, and this has been doing pretty well for white in general.
And this is still part of the book they were given, I think.
Yes, knight c6 is the last move that they were given in the TCEC book. There's actually
the engines were quite happy with the white position.
Yeah, no, they were quite positive about the white position. It's worth pointing out there was a game between Caruana and Fabiano Caruana, the world number 2, and Erwin Lamy, very strong Dutch grandmaster, at Wijk aan Zee that went queen b6. It's quite interesting just to give you an idea of how do things look like in a sort of an ending situation. And these moves happened, and in principle, black's done, quite nicely, swapped off the bad bishop, the light square bishop, and the queens. But at the end of the day, this enormous kingside space advantage, gives white massive chances, and black does not have very many ways of getting counterplay. And in the game, Caro-Kann went through with f5 and won a very nice game against. Erwin Lamy's a very, very strong defender. So yeah, that he was unable to hold this sort of thing shows how dangerous this is for black. So yeah, it just goes to show that exchanging off the queens is not a general remedy for black, you can say, in these positions. The space advantage still counts in the ending. So knight c6, knight, and then knight f3, queen b6 from Leela, and now bishop e2, which is a rather unusual move actually. It's been very little played. Mostly white plays either king f2, which looks odd, but that king's going to g3. Just behind the pawns there, so a very nice place for it. And then white's ready just to carry on with his other development. Another interesting move that's been played is rook h2, just protecting the pawn on b2 so that the bishop on e3 can develop. Both of those very, very nice. Scorpio's plan is very interesting though. Bishop e2, Leela attacks the centre with f6. Looking for counterplay like all NNs do, and queen b3, which certainly caught me by surprise. But when you've seen the Caro-Kann Lamy game, you sort of understand. Well, white feels that the space advantage is useful even in the ending. So, well, why not just exchange off queens and neutralise that black pressure against the queen side, the b2 pawn, and the d4 pawn. And in actual fact, there's even more to it than that, because until I played some engine games between Fat Fritz and Stockfish, I hadn't realised what the really cunning idea is behind this. Because if black plays, so black played queen c7 in the game, but if black plays queen takes b3, takes c takes d4, which looks very natural, just aiming after c takes d4 to stick something on b4, then white actually plays this move b4.
So white doesn't retake the pawn straight away.
No, it's a pawn sacrifice, and after d takes c3, b takes c3, f takes c5, b5, knight d8, knight e5. White was scoring very heavily from this in the engine games. There's lovely compensation. That knight on e5 can come into g6 to attack the rook on h8. I'm going bishop e3 to attack pawn on a7. It's a really pleasant position for white. Masses of compensation. Well, the engines think it's it's a +1 advantage, so clear advantage. Bizarrely enough, in one game, or actually, no, I think in a couple of games, Stockfish went all in and actually played, instead of d takes c3, played this move f takes e5, and after b5 played knight b4. Incredible, but you're going to see these themes quite a bit. cb d3.
Black's giving up this piece, but look at that pawn centre.
Bishop d1, bishop d3, of course, then e4. Another typical trick we're going to be seeing a lot of. Bishop d1, e4, knight e5, bishop b4 check. Yeah, crazy position. I think in general, white was better here. Especially this move is very annoying with the rook going to h7. But it's a pretty complicated puzzle for white to unravel. And well, I wouldn't fancy being surprised by this in a practical game, I can tell you. For example, the pawn on b5 is hanging as well. So there's some crazy stuff there. But Leela decides not to exchange off queens and plays queen c7. The latent threats here is to play c takes d4. Oh, sorry, c takes d4, c takes d4, and knight takes d4, and then the bishop on c1 is hanging. Now, to be honest, I was quite keen on solidity here, but Scorpio plays an incredible move. It plays knight h4, aiming for g6. Just a word
I think
about.
that's a good move.
Well, maybe, probably is a good move, but it's in a practical game. I think you really would be very silly to do this as a human, because after knight h4, black can play solidly with knight e7, or can go crazy like Leela did, sacrificing a rook. And so you've got to look at both possibilities. Whereas you could also just play this very solid move, bishop e3, and it protects d4, just prepares to develop, and just keeps all the advantages in white's position. I mean, black's got quite a few, ideas. I mean, you can play knight a5, queen d1, knight c4, for example, is one. But white just plays bishop c1 and chases the knight back with b3, and then that's that counterplay over. I could play queen b6, attacking the pawn on b2, but I just play b3 and deal with that, and then carry on developing. I was looking at, castling queenside, knight bd2, but this is rather, I don't know, it's rather tricky for black. I mean, if I just play a move like, for example, knight e7 as well, then white can consider just taking on f6 and taking on c5. And this, you sort of think, well, has black got a center or something? But after e5, for example, you can look at playing moves like f5. And black's just contained. It's very hard for black to get free. That bishop on f8 is passive, and very hard to win the pawn on c5. I mean, we played quite a few engine games from here, and it didn't look nice for black at all. So I mean, black should play probably something like f takes c5, knight a5, something like this, followed by knight e7 to c6. But in general, I do like white. But well, you can't blame anyone for going completely crazy, because we get a great game from it. So c takes d4 and knight g6, f takes e5 and knight h8.
White's won a whole rook.
White's won a whole rook. It reminds me very much of something that happened in my career, actually, because I played GM Julian Hodgson, very talented player, fantastic attacking player. Once called a little bit tongue-in-cheek the Grandmaster of Disaster. But I was playing him at the Watson Farley Williams tournament, I think in the late 80s. He was much stronger than me then. I mean, I was quite young, but he played a Benko Gambit and beat me in a beautiful game. But at some stage, he sacrificed the exchange, and I played bishop on c3, takes a rook on h8. And, I hadn't really felt that it was necessary to give up the exchange like that. So I asked Julian about that after the game. Why did you do that? He said, well, if you take it, I don't need to develop it, do I? And, it just made me laugh when I heard it, even though I'd lost the game. But it reminds me of this, really, because, you're sort of, you see a move like knight h4 and you think, oh, that knight's coming into g6. I'm worried about my rook on h8. Well, you just give it away, don't you? And then you don't need to worry about it. So knight h8. And then e4. Yeah, Natasha talked about central pawns. Here they are. And it's a very interesting position, this. Really very unclear. I mean, on the one hand, black's obviously got these threatening central pawns. But there's not much else besides that. If you look at the development, for example, I mean, even though white spent 1, 2, 3, 4 moves taking the rook, black doesn't actually have a lead in development at all. It's quite bizarre, really. But there is one thing that white has to deal with, is this threat of d4 to d3. And, if white destroys that pawn with c takes d4, then the knight comes into d4, and suddenly black is getting pieces close to the white's position and is starting to create some threats. So black's got to hope, basically, that threat's strong enough to...
That bishop on c1 is still hanging. And
that bishop on c1 is still hanging, of course, as well. I mean, in some of the games, engine games I played, white did try this move, bishop b5, just allowing d3. But the games that happened were amazing. I've never seen anything like them. B takes c6. Let's have a look. Knight g6 was one idea. Bishop d6, castles, knight f6, queen d1, defending the pawn on g4. And now the pawns start to come. Look at this. C5, just like Space Invaders, these guys. So
that for a pawn center.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? It's the game continued completely crazy as well. The Stockfish was white, Fat Fritz was black, and eventually it ended up as a draw. But I mean, absolutely crazy game. And there was another line that I think Stockfish as black was quite keen on. I think white was playing queen d1. And here the pawns started coming through in a way as well. c5, bishop takes, d4.
It's like Space Invaders.
Queen d5, e3.
Coming down at you from the sky.
Exactly, e5. In they go. You know, just a crazy position. And well, it seems to be probably a bit better for white. But Stockfish won a lot of games with this as black, and it's just a super sharp position. It plays those like no one else. So I mean, you know, you can see anyway that quite apart from any objective assessment, which I'm completely not sure about, it is very dangerous from a practical point of view. And that's what's lovely about getting engines to play this, because if you just look at raw analysis from engines, they might just say slightly better for white somewhere, and you don't really understand, is it really better? Could I play it or not? You see the games and then you get a real feeling of, okay, if I do this, this is what I have to expect. But Scorpio played knight g6, so threatening to take that bishop on f8, which would be an annoying attacking piece for black to lose. So bishop c5, and now Scorpio took on d4, deciding that d4 to d3 was just a big threat. But knight d4, and well, now you see at least that black's got a few more pieces into the game. A bishop on c5, attacking vaguely towards the king as well. So not bad. And well, I mean, now you've got to choose on an approach here for black. I mean, what I was looking at all the time actually was to actually take that bishop on e2 with a knight, and then try and throw my pawns forward. But that doesn't actually seem to be the very best. At any rate, Stockfish was managing to hold on quite beautifully in those positions. So it probably looks like what Scorpio did was like what Leela did was actually the best. And we're going to have a look at that. So bishop b4 check, king f1. To be honest, I did think that king f2 was more natural, because after all, I want to hide that king on g3, which is a good square. That's also interesting, although apparently, according to the engines, not as good as king f1. We were getting these types of positions where black's going to try and play d5 to d4. Very sharp still, but that king is somewhat awkward on f2. He does get hit by a lot of checks, so probably again, the engines. You can trust the engines to put the king on f1. I mean, here was one of the points where I was very interested in playing knight takes e2. Obviously, queen takes e2 allows queen takes c1. The bishop is loose, just like Natasha said. So king takes e2, and that looked vaguely dangerous, really. But I was thinking I did like d4 or something. But Stockfish just manages to hold this completely. I mean, you've got those two central pawns, but your pieces are still somewhere away from the white king, and that knight on g6 is doing a lovely job of keeping pieces at bay and stopping breaks. And well, in practice, Stockfish just always managed to somehow get its pieces out, and and with some precise capturing of stuff at inconvenient moments, just managed to get an advantage all the time. So it looks as if this is probably wrong, although I'm sure in a practical game that would be what I would do. But Leela goes for material, goes to win back material. And a3, bishop d6, that's the main line. Bishop a5 is an alternative, but bishop d6 is the main line. And now rook a2, funnily enough, just keeping the rook. Of course, black wasn't interested in taking this rook because well, this dark square bishop is a very nice piece. It controls all the dark squares in front of these pawns. So you really do want that piece to have any chance of getting a strong center. Rook a2, bishop a4, threatening a nasty discovered check. Queen d2, and now d4. Here they come. Well, black's done pretty well, really, with his initiative. Although, of course, you've got to realise all this is happening on the queen side somehow, and of course the white king's on the king side. So there's no direct threats yet. But any one of those pawns advancing, the d pawn or the e pawn, especially the d pawn, that's going to cause some serious problems. And of course, that rook on a2 is vulnerable. Bishop b3 is a big threat as well. And so far, you know, white's well, he's taken his rook, but after that, he's not really getting at the black position anymore. So, yeah, for the moment, you know, still completely in the balance. Rook h3 was played, which is actually the use of that rook along, well, either the second rank or the third rank, very typical in this line. Well, since you've played h4 to h5, good to use this space for the rook. d3, very natural move, and now apparently there was some inaccuracy by Scorpio, or at least the engine seemed to prefer in the end not this move knight c3, but the move bishop takes d3. When e takes d3, knight c3 takes knight b5 is the variation. I mean, I can understand these moves, but you know, to say yeah, these are absolutely the most accurate, of course, would be absolutely impossible for me. But essentially, what's happening is that white manages to just transpose this into an ending a pawn up. So the tactics are quite funny, of course. Bishop c4 looks decisive, but then knight takes d6 check is very strong. So this move knight d4, knight's on prise, of course, but c1 is hanging, as well as the rook on a2 still. Knight d6.
You wouldn't like this position in time travel.
No. It's just it's a total nightmare. But it comes out to this in the end. Which is a position where white's opposite coloured bishops, but a pawn up, you know, and black's pawns are weak, but black's pieces are also quite active. And in general, my engines were holding this with black. I'm not sure a human would, but yeah, I mean, the engines are quite capable of holding this for however many hundred moves it takes. So, you know, very interesting what's happening there. Knight c3 is another good move, but seems to be just actually leading to well, to a draw for the engines anyway. D takes, queen takes, and now this lovely move knight d4, attacking the queen, queen e4, and bishop b5 check. I mean, these are the things that humans find so difficult, right? Because you know, there's just pieces hanging all over the shop, and well, you've no idea whether you know whether you're really losing something or not. The simple tactical point behind this is that if knight b5, then I've got queen takes c1 check, which just seems to lead to a draw. Again, queen c1, very important idea. So king g1. The nice point about that now is that if queen d4, bishop c5 wins the queen. So that knight on d4 is now safe. So I can just attack the queen with knight f6. Queen e1 and bishop c4. And, well, black's lost his central pawns, but pieces are still very active. And, I mean, white's pieces look a little bit, you know, spread out, uncoordinated all over the board. So, it's not bad, and of course black's next move is going to be castling queenside, and his king's pretty safe, whereas white's king is a little bit open. So, you know, just
white's still the exchange up, of course.
White's still the exchange up, but to get his rooks active, or develop the rest of his pieces rather, black actually ends up giving white ends up giving back 2 pawns. So black's actually now got 2 pawns for the exchange, so you know, good material balance. But now the balance shifts again. White's developed, so white's pieces start moving towards black's, and castles queenside and rook c2, pinning the bishop to the queen. So some threats starting to come along. Black plays b5 and rook g3, trying to get rid of that knight on g4. And now the engines, they're starting to converge, well, not to absolute equality, but starting to converge to something a little bit more akin to equality. So bishop takes a3, one of those moves where, yeah, the computer just grabs pawns and says, it looks very dangerous, but I don't see a threat, so I'll just grab some material. Queen takes b3, takes, and rook b3. Phew! So after all that incredible stuff, we've got it into an ending. Actually, you see this a lot in engine games. So white's managed to pick up a piece, but for 3 pawns, and well, you've got 2 knights and split pawns, and well, in general, that's quite difficult to defend. Difficult to defend your pawns against when the opponent's got a rook. So in general, I think black's okay. I think the engines were still a little bit more positive for white here, but when you look at what happened in the game, then you don't really feel that white ever had any serious chances here. B was here. B4.
Obviously, this game was always going to be a draw.
Well, that's right. That's right. Knight e5, rook d4, knight c5, attacking the pawn on d6, on e6, king d6, knight d3. So Scorpio's organised itself, managed to protect everything. But now these queenside pawns start rolling, and well, the rook has to go to a1, attacking the bishop on a3 to stop the pawn moving on. But now black's king comes in. I tell you, to be honest, if I was white in this position in time trouble, I would be very worried about losing it. On the other hand, with black, I'd be worried about walking into a knight fork. So I think I'd just be worried full stop. I think that's worried either way. I think that's the point. Rook a2. So they sort of they've reached some sort of equilibrium here, where it's not very clear what you're going to do. But in the end, Scorpio takes this opportunity to liquidate the queenside pawns, grab the piece, but Leela grabs 3 pawns for the knight, and well, this is obviously just a draw, and they drew about 20 moves later. I'll put the PGN in the comments to the video, so you can look at that at the end of that if you want to see it as well. So there we are. I hope you agree. That was a pretty fantastic game. The engines just from the opening just going for it completely. I think the opening itself with pawns being moved all the time is fantastic, but this move knight g6 just and then the Leela response, just sacrificing the rook, and all these crazy variations with central pawns. Really quite a fantastic game. So, hope you agree, and hope that inspires you as well to look at more of these engine games, because really there has been some fantastic chess so far, and well, it only gets better and better. So there we are. If you enjoyed this video, then please subscribe to our channel. And also, if you haven't had a look at our book, Game Changer, then yeah, please do take a look at it, because it's a really great book. Fantastic games in there. Lots of games like this, actually, played between 2 great engines. And otherwise, well, thanks for watching, and keep watching this channel, because well, we're following the TCEC very closely, and we've got lots more videos planned. Okay, thanks for watching.
Keep safe, and thank you very much for watching.